An ideal company I would like to work for is 7-Eleven. I would like to work for 7-Eleven as they are a major multinational corporation, and I very much enjoy their products. Specifically, I would like to work in the Asia department for 7-Eleven and help the company grow in the East Asia region. My skills as a business information technology and analytics major with a computer science background who has experience living and studying in East Asia will help me very much in this position. This is because companies' growth strategies involve data analysis and reporting on key data points. My analytical and IT skills, as well as my computer science background and my experience in East Asia, make me an ideal candidate for this position. 7-Eleven has become quite dominant in the East Asian space in recent years, with over 30,000 stores in East Asia. 7-Eleven has achieved such a foothold in the East Asian market due to the adjustment of their stores to cater towards the markets in specific countries. 7-Elevens in the East Asian region are typically higher end and are viewed in a much greater vein than 7-Elevens in the United States. Despite already being the most successful convenience store in East Asia, with changing demographics and overall sentiment, there is still a lot of room for growth in the East Asian region. And I will discuss this as well as my qualifications for this position in the rest of the presentation. My entire life, I've always been interested in how things interact through a global lens. I've always been keen on learning as much as I can about different countries and cultures. I cannot get enough of flags, maps, languages, religions, cultural differences, and habits of people in various parts of the world. Since growing more mature and learning more and more about various topics, my keen interest in the international world around me has zeroed in on business. I love reading articles, watching documentaries, and learning as much as I can about how businesses interact globally and adjust their strategies to appeal to different audiences. Because of this, I knew I wanted to do whatever I could to exist in the world of international business. I started college as an international business major, but after taking a computer science sequence, I realized that I want to study something that married my love for international business and my newfound skills for computer programming. Because of this, I decided that the most appropriate major for me was Business Information Technology and Analytics, or colloquially known as BIA. I truly believe that this major is one of the most valuable majors students can receive at DU, as the world of business is beginning to revolve more and more around analytics and the accumulation of mass amounts of data in order to improve businesses. My interest in the East Asia region started in high school when I started learning more and more about Hong Kong during the protest in 2016. This then manifested itself with a love for learning about the special administrative regions of China, as well as mainland China itself and Singapore. My curiosity for this region took me so far as to apply to study abroad in Hong Kong. But because of COVID-19, this trip was canceled, so I instead decided to study in Seoul, South Korea at the Korea University Business School. I was fascinated by all things South Korean, and living there was one of the most positive experiences of my life. This inspired me to live and revolve my work life around all things East Asia and pursue a career in this region. With my business analytics skills, curiosity for the world around me, and my willingness to work and live in the East Asia region, I believe I am a very ideal candidate to work at 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven was founded in 1927 in Dallas, Texas as a retail convenience store. 7-Eleven exists as a subsidiary of 7 & I Holdings Corporation, which is headquartered in Japan. 7-Eleven Japan purchased the 7-Eleven United States in 2005 after the company underwent some financial issues. This is ideal as most of the major corporate activities for this company already exist in the East Asia region. Due to the majority of 7 & I's executive being Japanese and the company being headquartered in Japan, it would be important for me to immerse myself in Japan and try and learn as much about the culture, language, and business dealings in this country in order for me to be as successful as possible. I should also consider pursuing an MBA or a master's in a specific concentration in order for me to more successfully rise in the company standings. There are many corporate positions on this company's website for an individual with my specific skill set, and mostly they're looking for someone proficient in Python, RStudio, and SQL that has some semblance of experience in the food service industry, which I do, as I did a summer internship at a company called Sodexo last summer. The Chief Technology Officer, or CTO, of 7-Eleven went to the University of Denver, and there are a few, but not too many alumni from the University of Denver that work at the 7-Eleven. All of whom, however, work in their corporate U.S. headquarters in Irvine, Texas, and I was unable to find any major business activities concerning DU alum that exist in the East Asia region. Although I want to work for 7-Eleven in the East Asia region, all of the pestle analyses we've had performed in class have been in the United States, so this is a disclaimer that my pestle analysis for 7-Eleven will be for 7-Eleven within the United States. The first step of the pestle analysis is political factors that affect 7-Eleven. There are various political factors that can affect the convenience store industry in the United States. A lot of these are regulations concerning the labor laws for 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven tends to work employees pretty long hours as the store is open 24/7, and in some areas they don't have quite the amount of workforce needed to operate a 7-Eleven 24/7. So the changing in labor laws, especially under the current administration, are a huge political factor for 7-Eleven. The next one is the obvious one that just comes with political factors in the United States, which are taxes. Corporate taxes and sales taxes are the most prevalent for 7-Eleven, as property taxes don't concern them too much, as they don't own the properties or the majority of properties that 7-Elevens operate. But I'd say the rise in sales taxes in various states can affect 7-Eleven the most, as that will increase the price of their products, especially because they sell a lot of alcohol and tobacco, which are subject to higher taxes than other products. And many states like California and Oregon are proposing raising the taxes on those products. So those are the primary political factors that affect 7-Eleven. In terms of economics for 7-Eleven in the United States in a pastel frame, economic growth kind of affects the convenience store industry, as because it's a retail industry, it can kind of be a byproduct of the status of the economy. The more money people have and are willing to spend, the more they're going to be spending it at retail establishments such as 7-Eleven, with the economic outlook for the United States not looking too great in the future with the high levels of inflation and unemployment that have been developing this year. It is safe to say that maybe economically moving forward, 7-Eleven might have to make some adjustments in order to appease the economic status of its consumers. A big part of this is inflation, as inflation's been quite high lately, and 7-Eleven is kind of associated for their cost leadership strategy, where they're associated with cheaper goods and cheaper items for food and alcohol and tobacco, etc., their primary items. So inflation can affect its profitability, as maybe people are going to be less likely to shop at a 7-Eleven because of the higher costs, and it's higher than they were expecting and are used to at 7-Eleven. The primary social factor I think affecting 7-Eleven right now in the United States is the growth of health and wellness products and the kind of overall sentiment around health and wellness in the United States. 7-Eleven is not necessarily associated for peddling the healthiest products on the market, and they are very associated with kind of alcohol and tobacco, as well as inexpensive food. So I think 7-Eleven would need to kind of reevaluate the kind of food they're offering, at least, to make sure it's kind of fitting in with that health and wellness. And there's still trends in alcohol like hard kombucha and hard seltzer, which are associated for being healthier than traditional like beers and malt liquors. So 7-Eleven should probably look for having more of those products, as the health and wellness in the United States is not necessarily coincided with their current products that they sell. For the technological factors of 7-Eleven, I think the rise in the digital stores is kind of affecting 7-Eleven. It may save them money in the long run, but you have examples of like Amazon opening stores where there's not necessarily a cash register person, as well as McDonald's where you can just order in a kiosk. I think 7-Eleven's a little different because they sell products that are age restrictive, so they're going to need some service there to make sure the age of the customers buying the products is correct. But I think given the trend of digitalization, 7-Eleven is going to need to kind of catch up with other stores. And then online shopping has also affected 7-Eleven. You can order 7-Eleven online, but it makes up a very small percentage of their business. And 7-Eleven kind of relies on like quick stop and goes. So with the rise of online services that are able to deliver tobacco and alcohol products, as well as snacks and hot food, I think 7-Eleven is going to need to up their online presence in order to compete. The environmental factors of 7-Eleven kind of coincide with legislation and political factors, as there has been a lot more carbon neutral kind of legislation being floated in the United States, and there's been talks of a federal carbon tax. 7-Eleven isn't a large polluter, but they do have gas at some of their stores, and they're going to need to kind of reshape their business outlook in the United States to coincide with the environmental regulation. 7-Eleven does produce a lot of waste too, so maybe like a waste management service could also be an environmental factor, but there's not necessarily much legislation going on to reduce waste in the United States. And for legal factors, I already kind of touched on this with political factors, but legislation being passed for work requirements and for working hours, 7-Eleven tends to work employees long hours, like I already mentioned. So that's something they're going to need to look at in especially more like rural areas where there's not as big of a workforce. Minimum wage laws have been rising, but 7-Eleven actually tends to pay their employees with the minimum wage. So that's definitely something to look at. For example, in Denver, minimum wage just went from $12.80 to $17. So that is something that's going to affect 7-Eleven as to operate a 24/7 store. They're going to need that workforce, and they're going to need to be paying people 24 hours a day. So the rise in minimum wages will have a big impact on 7-Eleven. The next step in Michael Porter's 5 forces is the threat of new entrants. And I'd say the threat of new entrants is relatively low because of the high capital requirements in the convenience store industry. It requires a significant amount of capital investment to set up stores and purchase inventory, and this can act as a barrier to entry for new players. So this makes the threat of new entrants quite low. The bargaining power of buyers is quite high. Because of the enormous number of customers, low switching costs, and accessibility of replacement goods and services, consumers' bargaining power for 7-Eleven in the United States is generally rather high. Also, a lot of clients are quite sensitive to price and might look for less expensive options depending on how expensive their 7-Eleven is. The positive brand recognition and reputation of 7-Eleven, though, might lessen the negative effects of buyers' bargaining power. The bargaining power of suppliers, on the other hand, is quite low. The convenience store industry has a lot of products that it services, and because of the amount of different opportunity for suppliers that 7-Eleven can go to, the threat of suppliers, the bargaining power they have, is quite low, as there are quite a lot of options for 7-Eleven in terms of suppliers. The threat of substitutes for 7-Eleven is relatively high due to the accessibility of alternatives from other convenience stores. There's a lot of price sensitivity and prone to switching to less expensive alternatives. So there is a threat of substitute for 7-Eleven with the less expensive alternatives at other convenience stores in the United States. But I think 7-Eleven can lessen this risk by providing a distinctive service and kind of working on the strong brand identity they already have. And for the 6th force, the complementary products, 7-Eleven kind of provides a range of complementary goods for whatever the consumer is looking for, because 7-Eleven tends to market itself as a one-stop shop. These include food, drinks, gasoline, lottery tickets, and tobacco products. For the competitive rivalry in terms of getting a job at 7-Eleven, my biggest rivals are competitors with a higher GPA than I and more experience in the field, as I only have 1 summer under my belt in the industry with the company Sodexo. And although not necessarily in the quick stop convenience industry, it was at a corporate level in the food services industry. But I'd say the biggest setback for me is my lack of language skills. I do not speak any Japanese, and to work in Asia for a Japanese country, I would need to possess somewhat of a high level of understanding for the Japanese language, as well as a high level of the understanding of the vernacular for whatever country I am working in. The VRIO for my skill set is such. My most valuable skills I can bring to the table are my proficiencies in multiple computer languages, including but not exclusive to Java, Python, SQL, Visual Basic, and RStudio. Rarest is my willingness to live in East Asia. Inimitable is my recent experience living in East Asia and gaining connections there and learning about the business environment over there. And organizational is my connections in the region due to my upbringing in Washington, D.C., around many international business and men and legislators. My personal business level strategy will be to differentiate myself by building on specific skill sets. I will build on my language skill sets and attempt to learn, or at least develop, a proficient understanding of Japanese business culture and language. And I will build on my current connections that I have in the East Asia region. My strategy to gain this dream position is as such. In 1 year, I will aim to be an entry-level analyst for an East Asian department of an American food services company. And after 3 to 5 years, I'll try and gain connections within the industry and region and attempt to move into management under my current employer. At 10 years, I will leverage my connections in the region and my experience and move into a position through 7i Holdings. And in 20 years, I will try and leverage my experience and connections in the region, especially my experience at 7i Holdings, to move into an upper level management position.